So the third episode of The Last of Us makes some pretty interesting changes from the game. So just right off the bat, I'll say spoilers for this episode and some minor spoilers from the game. Nothing, that gets too far into the future of the game, but maybe talk a little bit about how these changes could affect the overall story. Last week, of course, Joel was killed by Abby, and there was the big attack on Jackson. And so some of that attack on Jackson is completely made up for the show. That wasn't part of the game. That plays into this episode. Before we get right into that, I just wanted to talk a bit more about Joel's death and how this was framed. One of the big changes from the game is that we don't know who Abby is or why she does what she does when she kills Joel in the game. There's no long monologue where she explains everything to Joel. There's no scene of her with the fireflies, burying their dead. We just meet this woman who Joel just saved, and then she kills him. And of course, it's done a little differently in the show. There's Dina instead of Tommy. Dina reveals Joel's name, etc., etc. But we kind of know she's after Joel at this point. And so it's framed very differently in the show, because in the game we don't find out what's up with Abby until halfway in when we switch to her point of view, and then we start to understand where she's coming from. And this was very controversial in the game, of course, and it makes me wonder if maybe they should have done something differently, even more radically different in the show, which is to give us maybe a full accounting of Abby's life before her father was killed, and sort of create this character who we think, or who at least, people who didn't play the game think is a new protagonist, a new hero, a new good guy, and sort of follow her story right up until we realize that it's Joel who is responsible for what happened. And I don't know, that could have been interesting. As it stands, we kind of get half of both worlds. We get just a little bit of Abby's story, but not enough to really care about her. But we also don't get to experience that sort of shocking twist later on in the game, like we get with the game, where we learn why she did what she did. So now we kind of sort of know, but we don't really care about Abby at all. So she's still just a villain, and we don't have any sort of big reveal coming later that kind of helps us, I don't know, situate ourselves inside her mind and her mentality going into that scene. Plus we have, the villainesque monologuing and the brutal killing, and that's just so much more, right? So much more impactful than learning that her dad was killed when he was trying to himself kill Ellie, who we care about a whole lot more than Abby. This is just a really tough story to tell or to adapt to TV, because in the game we get to have that whole gameplay side of things, playing as Abby. And even then, I don't think they sold it. Like, I was still really disliked Abby by the end. Like, yeah, sure, she had redeeming qualities, but she did such a horrible thing. It was hard to ever sort of say, oh yeah, I care about her, and I'm empathetic with her revenge against Joel, because really, it was just so brutal and awful. Anyways, this episode picks up after the events of the attack on Jackson and the murder of Joel. We get to see a brief moment with Tommy next to Joel's body, and then Ellie waking up in the hospital, where she's clearly much more injured than we thought she was. I think not only broken ribs, but punctured lung, because then we jump ahead 3 months, and she's just now getting out of the hospital, or whatever, the medical facility in Jackson. So right away, big changes from the game, obviously, because there's this big time gap. And Tommy is still there in the game. Of course, Tommy heads out right away to go after Joel's killers, and it's Dina, Ellie, and Jesse who follow him. And you don't play as Tommy. You sort of follow in his footsteps and see what he's been up to. Here, Ellie and Dina head out, not Jesse and not Tommy. We also get I think one thing they did well in this show is, though I think maybe the Battle of Jackson deserved it to be a separate episode from Joel's murder, because I think you don't need those two huge events in one episode. Could have maybe worked to have that whole battle take place, and at the very end, Joel saves Abby, and then at the beginning of the third episode is killed or something. I don't know. I would have to think about it more to structure it differently. But regardless, I do think the Battle of Jackson sets up the next segment pretty well, because there's a really good reason why the residents of this town don't want anyone to be sent off to find Abby and her friends, because they're worried that with Jackson in the state that it is, and having just suffered such a huge loss, that sending out, I think in this episode, they're planning to send out 16 people. Sending out all these hardened survivors would leave the town defenseless, which would be bad for everyone who remained. And so I think that is a good setup. I think that's a good change from the game to sort of explain why nobody wanted to go, and why Tommy and Ellie and Jesse and Dina had to just go on their own. But I do think it's a little weird to have a 3-month gap before all this revenging takes place. And I think it's a little weird to have Dina and Ellie head out first and not Tommy, because that the implications of that are pretty big, right? On just where the story goes, presumably for the next few episodes, because instead of sort of following in Tommy's footsteps and finding out what he's done and trying to find him, and, he, kills some people along the way, instead they're heading out first. And I imagine Tommy, and maybe Tommy and Jesse, will head out behind them. But we'll see. But it does change kind of a lot of the stuff that's going to happen, just getting these characters out of order in which, and maybe it won't matter. Maybe the story that they come up with will be just as good, but it is going to be very different. So in this episode, we get the council meeting. The two of the people speak, saying, giving their reasons for why they shouldn't send out this revenge party. One says because the town will be defenseless. The other says that because, revenge is wrong and mercy is what separates us from the raiders and killers and evildoers out there. And I think he makes a very good point, obviously. One that, the game and this show will explore. The only person who speaks on Joel and Ellie's behalf is Seth, the homophobic guy who Joel knocked down in episode 1 and who Ellie really hates. And she looks at him with confusion, because here's this guy that she hates and who's a bigot and all the rest, basically standing up for the her cause. Although he frames it very differently than she ends up framing it. He's all about, like, you guys are weak. They're going to come back laughing at us. Like, we have to take care of our own, or we'll get trampled all over. Ellie, on the other hand, appeals to the council and the people of the community by saying that this isn't about revenge, and it's not about her, it's not about Joel, it's about justice. And I actually really thought that Bella Ramsey did a pretty good job this episode, both in that scene, which we see a very different side of Ellie that's not just like shouting. Like, at this point in the show, I thought she'd, go in front of the council and just shout and be totally obnoxious, but instead she's very calm and reasonable. And Bella Ramsey does a good job there. And she also does a really good job, I think, when they go to Joel's grave. And this is a scene that I think they actually get better than in the game, because for one thing, it's just beautiful. Like, the grave's out of town. They show up on their horse with the sun setting in the distance, and it's just like this orange and purple glow everywhere. And Ellie kneels by the grave and leaves some coffee beans. Coffee was kind of a big part of their adventure in the first season. And she leaves some coffee beans, which is a really nice touch. But also, I just think Bella Ramsey, without even saying anything in this scene, was very good. And it's not easy to do that, right? To convey that much emotion and not have any dialogue. So I'm hoping that Bella grows on me this season. Now that she's outside, like beyond her obnoxious teenager, petulant self, on a mission. We'll see. And it's going to be interesting that, her and Dina are going to be the primary two characters now, rather than her and Joel. I'm not sure that I mean, I like their dynamic. I think they're good together. I think I'm enjoying that, but I don't think it's as strong as the Joel and Ellie dynamic. And that was a problem with the game too. So overall, this is sort of a calm before and after the storm. We had such a big, huge, monumental episode last week. This is much more calm, gentle, kind of the beginning of this adventure, right? The death of Joel is the inciting event that sparks the rest of the story. And that was a huge, terrible thing that happened. And now this episode is much, 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 much more like calm and easy. We do, however, meet the Seraphites, also known as the Scars. We get an interesting scene where we see some of them leaving the Seattle area, and there's like a father and daughter, and he explains that they're leaving war behind them, right? They're trying to find a place where they can live in peace. And I'm assuming that this is kind of a group of the Scars that have broken off from the main group, because I don't think that the Scars that we encounter later in the season are going to be peaceful, to put it mildly. But they are attacked by the WLF or the Wolves, and we don't see what happens. But later, Ellie and Dina come across the massacre, and all of these people are dead, including the little girl who was so cute. So we definitely get even more reasons to sort of despise Abby's group, because they are brutal killers of even innocent people who are trying to just leave. And so we also see a scene with, like, Dina tells Ellie earlier that she thinks it's probably a pretty small group, not a very strong splinter group from the Firefly Rebellion. But we see at the end a very large army of wolves marching through the city, through the streets of Seattle. We also get a great glimpse of Seattle and, the ruined skyscrapers covered in moss, and that's really cool. One thing this show does really well is recreate the scenery from the games. So I'm excited to see, more episodes where we get to see more of Seattle and this, because that was one of the coolest parts of season 1, was just how well they did, like, these urban areas that were overgrown with plants and moss. And we've also gotten quite a bit more of the infected this season already. Like season 1, I think its biggest problem was there just wasn't that many. So I'm really hopeful that as we get more into Seattle and into the story, that we get a lot more clickers and other monstrous entities, like the Rat King and everything else. I really enjoyed the cinematography in this episode, like just the scenes of Dina and Ellie riding across the American West, these big sweeping plains and mountain ranges and waterfalls. It was very, very beautiful. And I think this episode probably does serve as just the calm, gentle, beautiful episode in between the horrific shit that happened last week and all the horrific shit that's going to happen in the rest of the season. Because, as they get into Seattle, all that beauty is going to be completely sucked away. So overall, I thought it was a pretty good episode. Definitely better than episode 1. Not as exciting as episode 2, but we sort of set the stage for this journey, this adventure. They've made it all the way to Seattle. So we know that going forward in the 4 remaining episodes this season, we will have, pretty much they'll be in Seattle trying to track down Abby and her collaborators. The question I have, since Abby wasn't in this episode at all, and we really didn't see much of the WLF at all, the question I have is, are we going to get the rest of the season from Ellie's point of view? Do we end at the midpoint in the video game where things switch to Abby's point of view at the end of this season and then switch over in season 3 to Abby's point of view? Is that how they're going to structure this? I don't know. Maybe Abby will show up more in the rest of the season and we'll get both their perspectives this season. Or maybe they're going to do that kind of narrative switch. I've been wrong. I predicted they wouldn't kill Joel off until the end of the season. And maybe that would have been a good idea to show more of Abby's previous life and life in Jackson and all that and save that death for the end. But they didn't. So I was wrong about that. And I don't know. I guess we'll see. I'm still feeling pretty mixed on this as a whole. But we still have more than half the season left. So I remain open-minded. Even though, I've played the game and I remain mixed on the game too. A lot of people say it's the worst game ever. A lot of people say it's the best game ever. I think it was both those things. Like, there were parts of it that I thought were absolutely magnificent and so many things about it that just I did not like at all. So, let me know what you thought of this episode down in the comments, and thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Peace.